Hi, I'm Abby, and my group and I today are going to be presenting over our case study about Rule 9 to 5 in Abercrombie and Fitch, and a little bit about Rule 9 to 5. Rule 9 to 5 is actually a brand extension of Abercrombie and Fitch. I'm sure you've heard of the other lines, such as Hollister or Gilly Hicks. Rule 9 to 5 is just another brand extension of Abercrombie and Fitch. And according to Abercrombie, their publicity materials, Rule was actually named after the Rule family, who were immigrants from Germany in the mid-1800s who owned a leather goods store in Greenwich Village at 95 Greenwich Street in Manhattan. And supposedly Abercrombie purchased the rights to the family name in 2002. Now, this was not true. This was actually just a fun little marketing strategy to help create a fun little family brand connotation behind the name. There actually is no Rule family, and there is no Greenwich Street store. Rule was actually established in 2004 by Abercrombie, and at its peak only had around 29 locations to help create that mysterious, secluded atmosphere of it. Now, in terms of atmosphere, service, merchandise, and pricing, Rule was very distinct and separate from Abercrombie and Fitch. Its atmosphere had a very similar nightclub meets college library experience, where they had extremely dim lighting throughout the entire store and had very loud house techno music to really bring in a younger, youthful crowd, typically in the college age demographic. The stores really used this dim lighting to really project this upscale, mysterious, explorative, high-end connotation that most stores in the mall typically did not have. They also used special furnishing in their stores to create a more home and inviting, mysterious atmosphere. They used couches, side tables, bookshelves filled with lots of literature from Greenwich Street and Greenwich Village in New York to really contribute to that New York underground mysterious vibe that Rule really took to heart. Rule also featured lots of black and white posters of men, women, and brand polos and merchandise that created a really sexual image of the brand. In terms of service, Rule used product models instead of store associates. Rule hired these models instead of associates to represent their brand image beyond just their looks. They modeled the clothes in the store and helped guests purchase items throughout the store. They were also known for minimal greetings inside the store. They really believed the customers should have free reign and shop at their own pace and leisure and shouldn't worry about being hounded by store associates. Now here we have some examples of the typical Rule posters and advertisements. Here we have black and white images of young college kids in a bar in Manhattan. Most of the time they are shirtless, very skinny, athletic type builds. And here we also have an example of the typical store layout. See, we have couches, side tables, lamps, fresh flowers, and bookshelves to hold the clothes. Really creates a boutique feel in the middle of a mall in America, was their explanation of that. Now, looking at the merchandise of Rule was generally more sophisticated than Abercrombie and Fitch. That was their way of separating themselves. In terms of men, you could find distressed, premium, high-quality denim, high-quality button-downs, polo tops, much more adult clothes compared to Abercrombie and Fitch, which featured graphic tees and such clothes like that. Same thing with women, where you had slip dresses, shrugs, leather goods, jewelry, accessories, which were much more grown up in comparison to Abercrombie and Fitch. Their pricing was also another tool that they used to really separate themselves from their Abercrombie and Fitch home base and put themselves more in line with their competition, such as Banana Republic, Gap, and The Loft. So you can typically find distressed denim anywhere between $110 to $158 in 2005, and their famous canvas women's jacket, worn by celebrities, was priced at around $200 in 2005. Rule 9 to 5 really used their target consumer segments in a special way. They really focused on the cool kid and sexy collegiate aesthetic. So the majority of their advertisements featured preppy, athletic young teens that really revolved around the pop culture of the 2000s, with shows like 90210 and Gossip Girl. Rule really relied and used a lot of celebrity paparazzi photos to promote their brand among college-aged younger adults, with celebrities such as Vanessa Hudgens, as shown, and Jessica Simpson, who were members of popular reality TV shows at the time that really encompassed that cool kid and sexy collegiate aesthetic they were going for their consumers.
How does Rural target recent college grads? Rural is a new fashion line of clothing. Its clothing are more mature, sophisticated, sexy, and useful. These characteristics are what college graduate students are looking for in the future. And after graduating, most people would like to find a job, so they need to find some clothes which make them look more mature and formal. Also, the quality is an important factor for them since they are going to work the next 10 or 20 years. Rural products are adult tastes. From this picture, we can feel that these bags are not for the teenagers. The color and the way they look are simple but mature. Also, the store has a mysterious web with dimmy light, which also gives people a feeling of adults. How does rural look more mature but still connected to A&F? First is brand loyalty. Rural is an extension of A&F, and A&F was implementing a life stage need identification concept, which basically says that they are going to have different branches for different age groups of people. A&F is targeting 18 to 22 aged young adults, while Rural is targeting 22 to 35 years old adults. Because they are targeting different age groups, their products are going to be different. A&F products would be more energetic, colorful, and not too expensive, while Rural's products would be more mature. I looked through some clothes from A&F and Rural website, and I prefer to buy A&F's clothes.
Looking at the overall success of Rural actually went out of business in 2009, largely in part due to an overall decline in profits because of the 2008 recession and as their prices were no longer manageable to consumers. Now, there are a couple important attributes to the overall downfall of Rural was the aesthetic of the store. Consumers were no longer appreciative and had positive remarks about the dim lighting and the loud music. They felt it was uninviting. A journalist even noted that she was viewing consumers standing and blinking for several seconds to adjust their eyes after entering or leaving the store in comparison to the dim lighting of Rural and the stark white bright lights of typical malls. And typically they also found that the aesthetic was just no longer appealing. As the pop culture of 2000s died down, it became outdated and not relevant to the younger adults that they found themselves trying to appeal to and was no longer seemed cool. They also found that as time went on in the late 2000s, it was no longer acceptable to be exclusionary. Rural and Abercrombie and Fitch were extremely noted for having a lack of inclusive sizing. They only had size ranges from around extra small to large, which left out a large group of consumers who were not able to shop at Rural and Abercrombie and Fitch stores because they could not fit the clothes. They also had numerous discrimination lawsuits where previous employees and potential employees were suing Abercrombie and Fitch and Rural, claiming that they were wrongly discriminated against because Looking at the overall success of Rule, Rule went out of business in 2009, largely in part to the overall decline in profits due to the 2008 recession, because prices were just no longer affordable to consumers, as most of their consumer base was younger adults and their parents were losing their jobs. Another couple important factors to the overall decline in success of Rule was the overall aesthetic was just no longer appealing to consumers to get used to. The darkness and loud music was no longer inviting consumers in. It was actually doing the opposite. A journalist in 2005 noted that when looking at the overall aesthetic of the store at multiple malls, she was finding that consumers were standing and blinking for several seconds to adjust their eyes after entering or leaving the store. In comparison to that stark white bright light of the outside mall and the dim lighting of the rural stores, they also found that the loud music was just too deafening and would not let consumers focus in the store at all. And largely in part, they said that the aesthetic was just no longer appealing to that young adult as they were growing up, that sub pop culture of 90210 sexy collegiate vibes were just much more outdated and were just not cool anymore. They also found that there was no longer, as time went on in like 2000, it was just no longer acceptable to be exclusionary. Rule 9 to 5, and Abercrombie and Fitch were very well known for having a lack of inclusive sizing. They only had sizes ranging from extra small to large, which left out a large group of consumers in the extra large to triple X section of clothes shopping. They also had numerous lawsuits against them, claiming discrimination cases with potential employees and previous employees claiming that because of the color of their skin or potential religious affiliations, they were not allowed to work in the front of the store or in the store in general. In 2015, there's actually a Supreme Court case against Abercrombie and Fitch with a young woman who said she was not hired because she wore a hijab. Another factor of the decline success of Rule was just the overall lack of qualified sales force. As I mentioned before, Rule, Abercrombie and Fitch were not hiring their associates on terms of level of experience or relevance in the area of consumer shopping. They were really basically hired on promoting their overall brand aesthetic and their overall appearance, and that was not a satisfactory method to helping consumers with their shopping needs in these stores. Now, looking at the rebranding of Abercrombie and Fitch, currently in 2020, there is a new CEO, and one of his main tools currently in 2020, Abercrombie and Fitch is now trying to rebrand themselves and reintroduce themselves to the consumer base of America. Now in 2020, Abercrombie and Fitch is attempting to reintroduce themselves to their consumers and really rebrand themselves. They're really trying to break away from this 2000 era, the 2006 era of themselves, which famously their previous CEO famously told the Salon magazine, "Candidly, we go after cool kids. We go after the attractive, all-American kid with a great attitude and lots of friends. A lot of people don't belong in our clothes, and they can't belong. Are we exclusionary? Absolutely." This quote really angered a lot of Americans and people around the world, and this stood as a reminder to the new CEO of what they did not want to accomplish as their rebranding strategy. So now currently, all of the advertisement and promotional billboards feature young adults of various ethnicities, genders, and body types. Inclusivity is one of the main components of their rebranding strategies, but that comes in terms of an increase in size ranges and also as an increase in gender, ethnicity, and body types of the models. So now rather than appealing in the past how they used to appeal, how in the past Abercrombie used to use sex appeals and desires to really bring in consumers, they're now focusing on rebranding and using a connotation of freedom and adventure in replace of sexual images. They really are working on taking sex appeal and putting it into a new light. They're really removing that sexually explicit persuasion techniques, such as the large blow-up posters of shirtless men and women kissing in the middle of the store. And they're also making their merchandise much more appealing to a larger audience, as it is much more minimal and has a larger size range that appeals to a much larger consumer base. Now, here we have one of the new campaign photos for their denim line for Abercrombie & Fitch. As you can see, this is something in stark comparison to the older naked black and white images. Here we have numerous models of numerous ethnicities, ages, and genders, which is a big, large stepping stone in rebranding. In comparison to one of our previous ads, Abercrombie & Fitch, which features this black and white image of two almost naked young teens who are both fairly attractive and fit. And actually, these two models are the same exact models in this picture on the right. And this is another part of their rebranding strategy, but these models are now fully clothed and trying to bring in a larger, more older consumer base and more mature. Now, looking at the new target consumers of this Abercrombie & Fitch new era, they're no longer focusing on teens. Their new primary market focus is the Generation Z, or the late 20s, the early 20s to late 20s. They're really working on to really reconnect with those who patronized the store in their early teens, in the 2000s era, the early 2000s, and now trying to reintroduce themselves to them so they can continue shopping with them. They're really doing this by trying to really limit the sexualization of their brand and consumer. Looking at this ad campaign below, we have three friends on a car just hanging out. This is in stark comparison to the previous really highly sexualized ads in the past. This ad looks far more realistic, much more attainable to their target consumer base, much more relatable as well.
What mindset will make target segment happy with store? The decoration of Rural is very special. It's not like a shopping store. It doesn't have display windows in front of the store. It's more like an apartment than a store. The Rural has diverse products, not only clothing. It has vintage books, arts, newspapers, CDs, and magazines. Customers may not buy them, but it's good for Rural to have them. Rule number 9 to 5. Not just merchandise, but rather it tells you a story. In shopping beer and while wearing its merchandise, you are living a story. The question is whether that story is the one you want to live.
Thank you for watching, and here are our citations.